Hello, thank you everyone for attending our August session of the Esri Law Enforcement webinar series on how location can support opioid abuse reduction strategies. My name's Chris Delaney. I'm the Law Enforcement Technical Lead here at Esri. Previously spent 13 years as a crime analyst for the Rochester, New York Police Department. And today we're going to be talking about an exciting new set of solutions that were recently released by Esri that are free to download and use to support your agency or community's efforts to respond to the opioid epidemic. So just some quick housekeeping before we get into the webinar. The agenda today, first we're going to be talking about location challenges around community opioid strategies, some of the issues that agencies or communities face when dealing with location data to try to address the opioid epidemic. Then we'll introduce you to the ArcGIS for the opioid epidemic solution, including showing demos of all of the key solution capabilities. And it's a pretty exciting assortment of maps and apps that are accessible to you. So I'm looking forward to showing you all those capabilities. We'll talk a little bit about how you can get started with these capabilities, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions. In the meantime, feel free to ask questions using the question window on your webinar display. We've got Stacy Belladin, one of my colleagues here on the law enforcement team at Esri. She'll be fielding some of your questions during the webinar offline via text, and helping me get organized when we'll be responding to some of those questions live on air at the conclusion of the webinar. So it shouldn't come to as a surprise for most of you out there doing the work of your agency that the opioid epidemic is a problem that hits virtually every community. And for those of us working in the law enforcement profession, the nature of the problem is widely and deeply known and affects the operations of virtually every law enforcement agency in the country. So the nature of the problem is fairly well known internally to us, but more and more as agencies and communities attempt to respond to the opioid epidemic, we've observed from our users and customers that there are a number of core challenges around using location data that are limiting agencies from fully realizing the effectiveness of their opioid strategy. And what we generally see from many of our customers who are trying to employ some kind of comprehensive opioid strategy is that those strategies generally have four key pillar areas: education, making sure that citizens, policymakers, providers, and people who are facing or currently abusing opioids are aware of the nature of the problem, and that the agency is playing their role in educating the community about the nature of their problem. The second pillar is around treatment, making sure that those who are either struggling with opioid addiction or looking for pain management alternatives have access to appropriate treatments that can either get them off of opioids or prevent them from going towards the direction of opioid abuse. Likewise, from a prevention perspective, in ensuring that we're putting out resources that help prevent opioid abuse by reducing opportunities for opioid addiction. And then lastly, the response, the first responders' efforts to quickly respond and triage overdose incidents so that they don't turn into deaths. And the nature of these kinds of community opioid strategies often touch not only law enforcement, but a variety of different agencies and roles across a community, whether it is not just police, but also fire and EMS from a first responder perspective, Also, all of our colleagues in the public health profession, executives, whether it's mayors or county executives, who are ultimately responsible to the public for addressing these issues, citizens whose lives are touched both from the deaths or overdoses from family members or friends whom they know, and then also the analysts within these organizations who are trying to make sense of this location data to help drive decision needs of all of the other participants involved in these kinds of strategies. So it's a complex environment in which many of you find yourselves as you're playing a role in some kind of opioid strategy to combat the problem in your community. And from a location perspective, we've seen a number of challenges that agencies are struggling with when trying to leverage their data about overdoses, deaths, drug seizure and investigation activity and drug tip activity, naloxone deployment information. And the first one of these challenges is that often this location data exists in all sorts of different places, whether it's in a police RMS system or death data coming from the coroner, or treatment resources coming from the public health department. Getting access to that data in a place where you're able to get it all into one spot and it is accessible for everyone to use, and that data is refreshed on a timely basis so that decisions made using that data are fresh and relevant as possible. Secondly, issues around data sharing and collaboration. A really important issue in these kinds of strategies is how you're getting information out to the public and leveraging citizens to be able to act as feeders as well for various policy initiatives that the municipality has to respond. And not only is data sharing and collaboration with the public important because these kinds of strategies are inherently multi-agency, there's an important need to share location data and collaborate, either from a task force perspective or just general interdepartmental collaboration of location data and maps to drive decision making. Another big challenge that we see around these kinds of strategies is analysis. That when it comes to analysis of location data, in these kinds of strategies, maybe you're a crime analyst, but maybe you're not, and you're involved in one of these efforts. Maybe you're an analyst and you're working in a public health organization, but don't have GIS experience. So how do we enable spatial thinking and spatial analysis for folks who aren't GIS professionals per se? And how do we deliver analytical outputs in dynamic forms that stay fresh and are engaging for decision makers, and not just a hard copy static map that is immediately out of date the minute it leaves the plotter or the printer. And then data security, all of these needs are ultimately underpinned by an obligation to satisfy regulatory requirements that exist, whether it's HIPAA or whether it's CGIS, but at the same time, adhering to those obligations without compromising on enabling the people who need to use that data to use it in the ways that they need for their particular role to support decisions making. So ensuring that we're striking a balance between data security and being able to actually leverage data for decision making. And then just lastly, once you're dealing with all of these other issues, there's sort of the central issue of how do you organize this data in a way that makes sense for everyone? How do you create kind of a one-stop shop for everything related to your opioid strategy? And how do you support all of these different people that are involved in your strategy with maps or apps that are relevant to their particular view of the world? An executive doesn't need an analytical oriented app. An executive needs a dashboard, and first responders need simple and easy to use tools that are consumable from the field. So being able to provide location data in forms that make sense for all of the different roles that exist in a community opioid strategy. And so many of you know that those kinds of challenges are the challenges that inherently GIS is well suited for. For many of you, you're familiar with ArcGIS in the context of our desktop applications, whether it's ArcMap or now recently our sister product, ArcGIS Pro. But ArcGIS has really grown in the last several years to become a complete GIS platform that supports all of the different use cases and needs that an organization has around geographic information. So taking that data that at one point existed only on your local desktop and exposing it as services that can be consumed by a variety of different configurable apps that you now as an analyst might configure to deliver to all of those different users in your opioid strategy, whether it's folks in public health and they need an analytical app, or it's first responders out in the field and they need a mobile app for collecting data, or whether it's the mayor or the county exec and they need a dashboard for being able to track performance of the strategy. These new systems, and we call these systems WebGIS, what's really powerful about them is that they support a variety of different deployment needs. So they can be deployed in the cloud via what we call ArcGIS Online, so you don't even have to worry about infrastructure, or they can be deployed completely on-premise inside of your firewall, so they can be fully compliant with whatever security needs that you have. And they can be extended with a variety of APIs or SDKs that enable you to customize on top of this platform to be able to build your own specific workflows and needs. So this new direction that Esri has taken with our complete GIS platform that leverages this WebGIS construct is really about making more people in the organization effective with location data. And that means delivering not only tools for exposing GIS data as services that can be controlled through security, so they can be delivered, maps and layers can be delivered to the people who need it, but it's also a whole host of configurable apps for desktop, the web, and mobile devices that enable you to utilize that location data in ways that make sense to you. And those configurable apps that come with ArcGIS are really industry agnostic. So they can be equally applicable in law enforcement as they are in utilities or public works or the commercial industry. They're not oriented to any specific industry. However, one of the things that we also do is create what we call solutions. And solutions are industry-specific map and app configurations that take those industry-agnostic tools that you get with ArcGIS and give you out-of-the-box layers, symbologies, app configurations that support real workflows and real needs in your particular industry. And so that's what we're really talking about today in this webinar, is a new set of solution apps that have been recently built by Esri and released that help law enforcement agencies, public health organizations, and generally municipal governments utilize the capabilities of the ArcGIS platform to address location-related challenges that organizations have around their opioid epidemic strategies. And the solution that we released in June has really 6 key components to it. And these are capabilities that are delivered in the solution, so they're immediately you can spin them up and use them the day you deploy them, and they're organized around 6 key themes that we observed were common location challenges that our customers were facing. First, the ability to promote treatment options, to be able to track naloxone deployments, to be able to have apps that support citizen reporting of drug activity and drug-related tips, to be able to help citizens find drug drop-off locations, and then also to measure the effectiveness of those locations, tools to help executives monitor their opioid response strategy and to collect the data that's necessary to do so if they don't already have it, and then also apps and maps to help organizations educate the community about the nature of the problem and organizing their data to make it ready to be able to educate the community in the form of various applications. So let's take a look at one by one each of these different capabilities that are part of this solution. And I mentioned at the beginning that this is a rather robust collection of apps. It's, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 total applications that you get as part of this solution. You may find that some of them are relevant to your organization. You may find that all of them are relevant to your organization. But you've got the ability to take as many of these solutions as you want and deploy them into your ArcGIS organization, either in ArcGIS Online or on your ArcGIS Enterprise portal on premise, and use them virtually immediately with some of our new deployment tools that I'll talk about later on. So the first place I want to start is around promoting treatment and pain management options. To support the treatment side of any opioid strategy, we've got a couple of apps. The first helps public health officials be able to catalog the location of health resources in your community, whether that is actual treatment facilities or whether that's pain management facilities, whether that's drug drop-off boxes. A single, easy-to-use app that enables you to edit location data and capture attributes about each of those treatment or prevention resources. This app has been created using our web app builder template and uses a couple of standard widgets. This app and all of the apps that you see can be also completely configured to meet styling needs that you have. So you want your agency's logo on it, you want it to fit your agency's colors, it can do that. So this app helps you catalog those health resources and then ultimately delivers them in a public-facing app for citizens to use that helps them find those treatment options. Again, another configuration of our web app builder templates that surface a couple of simple widgets that citizens can use to search for either an address or click a point on the map and find nearby treatment locations. So let's take a real quick look at what this looks like in practice. So this is an example of our opioid treatment locator app. This is an app that you make available for citizens to use, and the citizen, as I mentioned, can utilize this in a couple of different ways. Here I've got some example data from Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. This isn't real data, it's just notional data, but I could type in an address. And in typing in my address, the app will automatically draw a default buffer. In this case, the default is 2 miles, but I could stretch it out if I wanted to, or if I wanted more nearby resources, I could find that. And I can see, in this case, a number of ready to check out drug treatment locations that are in this neighborhood, and I can get attribute information about contact information, the types of services they provide, and programs that they have available. I also could see nearby locations where Naloxone can be accessed, whether it's drugstores or pharmacies or other locations made available through the public health department. I can have contact information and know operational hours and even a link to the website. A sister app to this opioid treatment locator is an app that's called the Pain Management Locator. The Pain Management Locator works in essentially the same way as the opioid treatment locator, where I'm able to type in an address. Again, I'll type in my same address. And I can see pain management alternatives to using prescription opioids. So the real purpose of this app, and this is based on feedback that we got from a number of existing agencies who are Esri users, is they want to be able to promote alternatives for folks who are considering utilizing prescription opioids, or maybe they feel like they've been on prescription opioids for some type of pain management for too long. How do they find additional resources in their community? And that's what this does. Whether it's massage resources or physical therapy resources, yoga resources, just a quick and easy way to access the nearby alternatives to having to utilize prescription opioids. How do both of these apps get powered? Well, ultimately, they get powered by an app that would be utilized internally called the Health Resource Inventory app. And in this particular app, I would maintain these different data sources, whether it's treatment locations, whether it's pain management, whether it's drug drop-offs, and I have the ability for existing locations. I can edit that data and modify any of the attributes. So if phone numbers change, contact information changes, website changes, I can modify that. Or I can, as new information comes in, I can add that in as well. So a new yoga studio came into town, I can capture the location of it, enter attributes about it, and save that off as a new health resource. And the minute that change is made, that change is immediately accessible in my different public-facing apps. So if I go back to the public pain management locator app, I'm able to see in real time the new source, the new yoga studio that I had just created a second ago. I forget exactly where it was somewhere around here. And that yoga studio is now immediately available for public review. So this becomes a very simple way in which you can monitor and capture data in real time and have it made available for public, so for citizens to utilize in real time. So now let's take a look at some prevention resources that are part of the ArcGIS for the opioid epidemic solution. And the prevention resources that we've built are really oriented around supporting workflows for managing and measuring drug drop-off box effectiveness. And they kind of fit a couple of different things. First, for citizens, an app that helps citizens find nearby drug drop-off boxes. And then for law enforcement officials who are responsible for making collections on those drug drop-off boxes, a couple of apps that help them tally the collections that are made at each drug drop-off box, and then a simple app for being able to visualize how those tallies change over time. So let's take a look at those right now. So the first place we're going to take a look at is the Citizen app, very similar to what you had seen before from the opioid treatment and the pain prevention app. Works with the same way. I can select any location on the map, or I could type in an address, and it's going to draw that buffer and show me nearby drug drop-off locations with information about when it's available, who to contact, and if I wanted to get directions from my current location to that drug drop-off box. So that's what the public would utilize to find information about drug drop-off boxes. Then we also have several apps that could be utilized internally. The first that could be utilized internally would be a app for capturing information on collections for drug drop-off sites. So let's say I'm responsible for going and making collections of the disposed prescription opioids that have been dumped in these drug drop-off boxes. I can go to the location on this app that I'm picking up from today. I can add a new weight. So on site, I would weigh the drugs that were in the drop-off box on that pickup date. So maybe it was 2.75 pounds. Automatically puts in the date of the pickup and submits that. And so this is a way in which I can capture data on drug drop-off boxes and the weights that are picked up at any of those locations. And then I have a sister app that lets me select any one of these particular locations and see over time the volumes that have been disposed of at that location. This can be useful because it helps us articulate and understand where patterns of high volume prescription opioid drop-offs are occurring. So maybe an area where I need to have more drug drop-off boxes. It also helps me respond to marketing campaign efforts that I might have done to promote drug drop-off boxes. So I can see, did we see some kind of significant change in the amount of drugs that were dropped off in an area where we're doing advertising and promotion for some kind of special drug drop-off day at drug drop-off boxes. So that's those are the apps that we have to support prevention kind of activities. Now let's take a look at some of the apps that we have that in particular law enforcement agencies may be interested in around supporting a variety of response efforts that first responders are ultimately responsible for. And the first place to start is around tracking naloxone deployments. This is obviously a very hot topic for many first responder organizations, whether it's law enforcement or fire EMS, that naloxone deployments have become not only an essential tool in the first responder toolkit to respond to opioid overdoses, but because their cost is so high, it is increasingly critical that agencies that are footing the bill for naloxone to deploy out to their staff, that they're able to demonstrate return on investment in the form of the number of deployments that result in some kind of save of an overdose patient, and to be able to justify those costs both from a budgetary perspective and reaching out to other community funders who might make additional allocations of naloxone more available. So the first thing that we've built to support that is a form using Survey123. Survey123 is one of the configurable apps that's available in the ArcGIS platform, and Survey123 enables you to build form-based surveys that have conditional formatting. So if you answer yes to a question, certain subsequent questions will pop up. If you answer no, subsequent questions will pop up. And those forms can be deployed either on a web form, on a mobile app, or on a desktop app. So there's a variety of different ways in which users of that data can collect data, whether depending on their particular data collection needs. So in addition to those, that Survey123 configuration form, you also have, as part of Survey123, because this data is being captured in real time, Survey123 also comes with some built-in simple analysis capabilities. So some simple reporting that enables you to see for all of the surveys that you've collected, various types of charts and graphs on the attributes inside the different fields that you've collected. So why is this important? You can see in real time the ability to calculate those save rates. You don't have to pull it into a separate program to do analysis. You can pull up the analysis view of a Survey123 survey at any point and see real-time data on that particular question. And in addition, you also have the ability to, as part of that analytical window in Survey123, you can see in real time any additional, you can see spatial patterns in your data as well. And because Survey123 is ultimately just a ArcGIS service, that data that's being collected in real time can go into any other application in the ArcGIS platform to be able to visualize that data in real time, and we'll show you that in just a minute. But first, let's take a look at what one of these naloxone deployment forms looks like. And how we're going to do that is by going to my mobile device. So right now you can see my mobile device on my desktop, and you can see I've got a number of different apps. These are all configurable apps from the ArcGIS platform. And the bottom one here in the second row of my iPhone is one called Survey123. So I can select this, and I can see a number of different surveys that I have available that I could deploy on my, I could collect using my iPhone. So I'm going to select the Naloxone Deployment Reporter survey, and I'm going to start to collect a new survey. So I could add in an address, 123 Fake Street, and this is in Springfield. It automatically collects my date. I can select the drug that the patient is involved. You believe the patient's involved in. So in this case, we'll say it was oxycodone. The treatment method, so how the naloxone was deployed. In this case, it was an injection. I gave 2 doses. He is not conscious and not breathing. He is a 24-year-old male, white. I don't know whether he's been previously administered to. And so these are all questions that are out of the box. You can configure this further based on your unique needs, but this is an example of the survey that you get out of the box and ready to go. And most importantly, the outcome. What happened to this particular subject? In this case, the subject was saved and was transported to the hospital. And then I can also collect my location, the location. In this case, it'll just call the GPS of your mobile device, find that location, and grab the location of this naloxone deployment. So even if you're in a location like a park where there's not a hard street address, you're still able to collect the actual location of the deployment. And that starts to become important as the challenges around responding to overdose patients overlaps with challenges around things like homelessness, where you don't always have good concrete street address data, but you want to be able to understand spatial patterns of where the overdoses are occurring. So I can select the checkbox in the bottom right of my of my form. And now I have an option to either send this later, which I might want to do if I don't have internet connectivity on my mobile device, because let's say my mobile device doesn't necessarily have LTE, and I can only use it when I'm in my local Wi-Fi. Or if I had LTE and I'm out in the field, I can then send that survey immediately. And that survey is now available for anyone to utilize the results of my survey for visualization or analysis purposes. So let's take a look now at what the analytics view of my survey looks like. This is on our Survey 123 website. You can see kind of overall numbers and overall number of surveyors, when recent activity has been. And then if we go to the Analyze tab, we can see a question-by-question view of all of the questions on my in my survey. So I can see breakdowns by address, municipality, breakdowns by drug involved, and I can also see them not only in terms of various types of charts, but also in a map format as well. So it's very easy to see distributions emerge on a question-by-question basis. But scrolling down to the bottom, maybe the most important thing is to this question of outcomes. So I can see that across all of the naloxone deployment reports that we've done, that 26%, almost 27% died despite a naloxone deployment, which means that we're running about 73% of all of our naloxone deployments result in a subject being saved. That's important data to be able to justify the return on investment for additional funding for naloxone doses to equip your first responders with. So that's a quick overview of the naloxone deployment capabilities that are part of the ArcGIS for the opioid epidemic solution. We also have a couple of other response-related solution apps. And the next family of apps is around collecting and reporting drug tips around opioid activity from citizens. So first, a publicly accessible web form for citizens to use to report drug tips to the police. So this could be, open air sales of heroin, but it could also be suspected prescription fraud behavior, or people illegally selling prescription opioids. This is this is a Survey 123 form. In this case, you wouldn't have citizens use their mobile device to capture this information. You'd utilize the web version of Survey 123 to make a publicly available form that citizens could submit their tips from. And then you also have a tool that helps the person or persons in your agency who are responsible for following up on those tips to be able to manage and assign those incoming tips, as well as a dashboard to help supervisors visualize those tips. So let's take a look at those three apps now. So the first app is our drug activity reporter form in Survey 123. It's very simple and easy to use. I have a pre-established pick list of types of activity. Again, you can configure this additionally if you'd like. Let's say it's a prescription fraud for OxyContin. I can provide some additional details. I can have a date of observation. If I had a photo, and in this case, if I had, I saw a suspicious person or observed open air drug activity, I could take a picture using my phone. I could submit that. I also have the ability, if I want, to be contacted for more information. And you could see as I checked the yes radio button, 3 additional fields popped up. In this case, I'll just say no. And then it can also automatically, I can either type in a location, or it can grab my location based on the location of my device. Since this is a web form, it could be utilized from a citizen's desktop device. They could also access it from a mobile device if they wanted to. And again, as with the other form that I showed you, once the survey is submitted, it is immediately accessible for other people to use in the workflow. So this now is my second app in this suite of apps. This is the app for managing incoming drug tips. And so you can see right here, my recent tip that I just submitted is already here and readily available. I can see that tip. I could make a decision on what I'm going to do with that tip. So I can change a status. So it's currently in progress, assigned it out to the narcotics unit, and I am going to save that information. And that allows me to track this information and the status of each of these drug tips. Ultimately, in the process of managing those tips, I'm able to have some kind of a dashboard that helps me see open reports, closed reports. I can see the different types of drug reports that I've got. I can get information on those. Just a very simple and easy way to visualize incoming tips that are available. So the last aspect of apps to support response efforts, particularly in law enforcement, is really about executive oversight. So how do executives, whether it's a sheriff or a police chief or a public health commissioner, a mayor or a county executive, have insight and provide oversight of the key strategic elements of their opioid strategy and understand current trends on key performance indicators. To support that, we've created a dashboard configuration that gives them access to recent trends in all of the different key performance indicators, the different data sets that exist to support those kinds of activities. And then additionally, you've got the ability, if you wanted to make some of these data sets available, to share that data out as open data pages to facilitate transparency and to promote these kinds of activities to public and engaged citizens. So let's take a real quick look at what that dashboard looks like. So this is our opioid response dashboard, and it's got a number of key layers in it. It's got information on deaths, it's got information on overdoses. Let me turn these all off and we can see them one by one. So first and foremost, I've got maybe some background data on aggregated by population for each of the townships in my county, counts of overdose deaths. I could also see citizen drug tips that have come in. I could see drug drop-off locations if I wanted to. I could see locations of recent Naloxone deployments, drug seizure locations, opioid overdose locations, and opioid death locations. And for each of those layers, we've got some basic widgets in our dashboard that help us just keep abreast of recent trends. So for overdoses, I can see a list of all the recent overdoses, and I can see in the last 90 days how many we've had compared to the previous 90 days. And if my taskbar would go away, I could show you the rest of them. So in addition, I've got some other widgets that I can cycle through here. So I can see for deaths, last 90 days of opioid deaths compared to the previous 90 days. I can see recent naloxone deployments, and I can get information about any of those recent deployments, including the data that I just submitted from my house up in Western New York. I can see recent drug seizures and incoming citizen tips on various prescription opioid or open air sales related activity. And then just lastly, I can see drug drop-off locations, and I can see aggregate counts for all locations in the last 90 days compared to the previous 90 days. So this is a simple and easy way to be able to determine whether your marketing efforts that you've put in place have been effective and generated increased citizen dropping off of unneeded prescription opioids. So that's an example of the executive dashboard that's part of our solution app. And then the next thing that I wanted to show you with regard to open data is actually a real live site example of what an existing customer is doing using the open data capabilities that come as part of any ArcGIS Online organization. So if you were not previously aware, ArcGIS Online gives you the ability to spin up your own open data site as part of the default licensing. And using a new capability that we call Pages, you can kind of tell the story of your open data in charts, KPIs, maps, and apps that make open data sets more understandable to citizens in your community. And this example is from Oakland County, Michigan, where they've created a whole open data page around their initiative to prevent prescription drug abuse. They've got some key statistics here: pounds destroyed on their National Drug Take-Back Day, individuals treated last year, opioid prescriptions filled in the county last year. And then in those same category areas of education, treatment, prevention, and response, they have a whole suite of different maps on opioid-related deaths by township, a story map on lost loved ones to the opioid epidemic, prevention. They've got some maps and apps on where you can go to dispose of your prescription opioids, resources for treatment and recovery resources, treatment resources with associated apps. So this is a very clean and easy way to deliver an experience that involves open data to citizens, giving them the capability to answer questions rather than just get access to a data set. Now, the last area of our solution that I wanted to show is around education. This is probably the place that many communities often start first with. In fact, educating the community can be the place where you really start to get your feet wet around how you communicate and how you organize your community task force or your community effort to address the opioid epidemic. But the first place that many people end up starting with is, well, how do I take the data that I have that in many cases has personal identifying information in it, and I turn it into graduated color maps, for example, by city or by town or by county, so that I'm able to aggregate data in ways that communicate to citizens without making PII data available in violation of my either HIPAA or CJIS obligations. And I do that in order so that I can build dynamic information information products that help citizens understand and to educate them. And the primary way many communities are already doing this is using Esri web mapping application templates that we call story maps. If you're not familiar with story maps, they're simply a mechanism for bringing together text, images, videos, and dynamic maps to help tell some kind of sequential story, whether it's a sequential in time or it's thematic. It's a very clean and easy way in which you can bring together a variety of different media sources in a wizard-based builder environment, so they're very easy to use and consume. And then just lastly, if you don't already have all of this kind of data, many organizations and agencies have access, they've obtained access to opioid death information or overdose information. But if you don't in your organization, we've also built several additional forms using Survey 123 to help you capture opioid death and overdose information to feed this overall process of organizing your data and aggregating it and pushing it into web maps and pushing it into the other apps that you've already seen. So let's take a look at some of the capabilities under education right now. The first place that I'd like to start is with ArcGIS Pro. So if you're not familiar with ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Pro is a sister app to ArcMap. It's our flagship desktop application, and as of this year, it is now the primary flagship application for ArcGIS desktop application for Esri. If you've been a long time Esri user and you've been using ArcMap, this is the year to take a look at ArcGIS Pro and start to familiarize yourself with it, because moving forward, most of the development work that we do will be on ArcGIS Pro rather than ArcMap. And if you already have an on-maintenance license for ArcMap, you will already have a license for ArcGIS Pro. And so as I mentioned, one of the capabilities that comes with this solution is a ArcGIS Pro configuration. So you download it, and in that configuration has a set of tasks that help new or unfamiliar users to working with spatial data to be able to quickly and easily get started with taking their local data that they may have. So maybe you're getting an extract from the coroner's office on opioid deaths. How do I take that information and push it into the apps and maps that are part of this solution? Well, it's actually very easy to do. We've got this new capability in ArcGIS Pro called tasks, and it walks you through steps. And the first step is to publish a service layer in your organizational portal that's going to be using Esri's standard schema for overdoses, deaths, and drug seizures. You can see it over here in my table of contents on the left. And then you can start to take your local data and migrate it into this new layer set in one of two ways. You can either, if your data is GIS ready, i.e. it's already been geocoded, you can import that data and then map your local data schema to the schema of our services. Or you can, if you have data that's just in an address form, you can geocode that data and then map your schema to the schema of our services. So these tasks walk you through those activities in a very easy to use way. So if I wanted to import existing incident data, for example, so I could bring in an existing data set that I already have and bring that into my map. I can then start to select, if I wanted to filter out from that data set, a subset of that data that I wanted to bring into my opioid incident service that will power all of these maps and apps, I could. Once I had completed that query, and so this is the place where you would perform that query. I'm just going to skip that just because I'm using this as an example. I could then subsequently map my local data that I have to my target data set, and I can utilize a field map to be able to reconcile schema differences. And so this is where I would match the name of my input data, each field of my input data, to the input data, to the output location and the associated field in that data set. So it becomes a very easy way in which you can take your local data and push it into this existing service template that we have. Additionally, there's a couple of other capabilities as part of this task set. I've got the ability to aggregate my data, so I can add in my overdose data. I can then select my like a polygon area that I'm interested in, and then I can perform that aggregation process where I've got some sort of boundary layer and I've got some kind of input layer, so maybe my overdoses layer, and I want to count all that data up and be able to organize it. So I can run this, and ultimately the result of something like that would be able to create some sort of map like this, where I'm able to see counts of overdoses by township. And what's nice about these tasks is that they can be iterative. So I could continue to run these kinds of aggregate graduated color maps for all sorts of different slices and dices, whether it's I'm interested in males under 25, and I'm interested in heroin deaths only or fentanyl deaths only. But once you've done all of the different aggregations that you're interested in, the last thing that you can do is publish those layers up into your ArcGIS online organization or into your ArcGIS Enterprise portal so that they are accessible for people to use in a variety of different applications. One of which may be a opioid awareness story map. This is another of the solutions that are available with the ArcGIS for the opioid epidemic solution. It is a pre-configured story map with all the standard text and standard images pre-established in it. The idea is that you can take this pre-configured story map and modify it to your needs to help you tell your story, but it's a very simple and easy way to get started. And so you can build some of these example apps where you can see these different kinds of visualizations, looking at spatial patterns by age groups, being able to look at opioid overdoses in the context of different breakdowns by gender, and then also to be able to connect in these story maps other apps that you have deployed as part of the solution. So your drug trip, your citizen tips, or things like access to treatment resources, all these different apps in the solution, you can bring them all into a story map to make a kind of one-stop shop. And you know what's really exciting about this form of a story map is this is already a type of style for presenting this information that has been adopted by many communities. I'll have a link to this gallery in just at the end of the webinar, but what you're seeing right now is a gallery of user-created applications that are all built using the ArcGIS platform that are built by a variety of different state and local government agencies are around opioid-related issues. And so many of them are story maps that help citizens learn about the nature of the opioid problem in their community. In particular, the geo-story of opioid addiction down here from the Northern Kentucky Health Department is an excellent example of how you utilize dynamic maps, images, and video in a story map to tell a comprehensive story, not only of the nature of the problem, but of the community's response. So I know I've shown you a lot during this webinar. As I mentioned, that there are a lot of apps that are part of this opioid solution, some of which may be relevant and some of which may not be. If you saw something that you liked and wanted to implement some of these capabilities for your agency, how would you do that? Well, there's basically 3 different options that you could consider. The first is if you've got GIS staff in-house, all of these solutions are free to download and use, and they're downloadable using a tool for ArcGIS Pro that's called the Solutions Deployment Tool. It's a free-to-use add-in for ArcGIS Pro that lets you access a complete pre-configured catalog of all of these apps. You can select the ones that you want. You can configure aspects of them, so you can add new fields to layers, or you can modify drop-down pick lists to your heart's content, and it will then publish that configuration right into your ArcGIS Online organization or into your ArcGIS Enterprise portal. So it becomes a very quick and easy way in which you can utilize these pre-configured apps to get going immediately. You can deploy this entire suite of applications in only an hour or two into your org, and you can be using them by the end of the day. But let's say you're an agency that you don't have existing software, ArcGIS software, you don't have existing GIS staff, but you're interested in some of these capabilities. Esri also offers a opioid offering where we'll provide a package that combines the software that you need to be able to take advantage of these capabilities, together with professional services from Esri who can come in and spin these capabilities up for you so you're ready to roll with all of these, this complete suite of solutions around the opioid epidemic. Additionally, if you have very specific workflows or needs, liked what you saw, but you want to tinker them or tweak them to a very specific workflow that you might have, all of these solution offerings can be extended either from Esri Professional Services or any of our Esri business partners that can help tailor these solutions to specific workflow needs that you might have. Before we hop into questions, just very quickly, a couple of resources. You can either take a quick screen capture of this, or we will make sure that these links get out to you after the webinar. Getting access to see more about the opioid epidemic solution, you can find that at solutions.arcgis.com/local-government/law-enforcement/opioid. We also have all of the apps that I demonstrated for you today are all embedded inside of a story map, and they're all publicly available. So if this next bullet right here, you can go to this link and you can see a story map that has all of the exact same demo content that I just showed you in the webinar today, so you can play with it on your own and get a feel for it. I also have available that user example app gallery. So if you want to see what other municipalities are doing around using this technology and applying it to their community opioid strategy, you can take a look at some of these examples from this gallery. Or if you wanted to see what Oakland County, Michigan is doing using their open data page, what I showed you is publicly available and you can explore that as well. So I know we're running a little short on time, but I think we still have a few minutes left for questions. Stacy, do you have any questions for me?
I sure do. Let me start with, I've had a few people ask about if someone wanted to send a tip using one of the forms that you showed, is it possible for them to do it anonymously?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks, Stacy, and thank you to the people who asked. As I showed in the web form, they have the option of providing contact information. So if they don't want to provide information, they can provide a completely anonymous tip and you can't track it back. Or if they want to provide contact information, they have the ability to do that as well. If you have a particular need in your agency to control that, to either force anonymity or to force some type of contact information, all of these apps are completely configurable, so you can do that as well. Out of the box, the standard configuration that you get out of the box enables you to do either.
Great. Another question we had was, someone asked, is this agency-based, or once you decide you want to share this info product, is it visual to anyone who sees it? How is it shared?
Yeah, that's another great question, Stacy. So one of the most powerful things about the ArcGIS platform is how you utilize the security that's embedded inside ArcGIS to control sharing mechanisms. ArcGIS Online, for example, gives you the ability to control data and limit it to the users inside your organization, or to be able to share certain things out to the public. In ArcGIS Enterprise, our on-premise version, you have the ability to share to individual groups of users, or you can share to your entire internal organization. And in addition, on-premise ArcGIS Enterprise can also be connected to ArcGIS Online. So if you wanted to take a subset of data that you have in ArcGIS Enterprise, and you want to push it up to the cloud so that the public can access a subset of it, you have the ability to make that connection and push that data up. So whatever your security requirements are around a particular app, they can be supported using the ArcGIS platform, whether it is completely public data, whether it is completely private data, or whether it is some kind of mishmash of the two. You can support those using the out-of-the-box security capabilities that are part of ArcGIS.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And one of the questions were the categories and the fields that you have in the different solutions, are those defined by Esri, or are they user definable?
Yeah, so they were defined by Esri in consultation with other agencies. So when we build these solutions, we're not operating in a vacuum. We usually have a number of customers or existing users who act as subject matter experts to help us. So a lot of these particular drop down and pick lists have been shaped from feedback from members of the law enforcement and public health community. But since all of the forms and apps and maps that you saw are completely configurable, you can modify any of those pick lists to include whatever combination of fields makes sense to you. So another exciting capability is of the solution is you're getting something out of the box that's ready to use with some existing predefined pick lists, but if you want to modify them, you can do that as well. So it's flexible for whatever your particular agency needs are.
Great, thanks, Chris. I think that's all the time we have for questions, but if you have any other questions that came in, we'll make sure that we get them answered for you.
Thanks a lot for your help, Stacy. Before we conclude the webinar today, I just wanted to note that this law enforcement webinar series is just one of our larger Esri public safety webinar series. So we generally try to run one or more public safety webinars every single month. If you go to www.esri.com/pswebinar, you can see a list of the upcoming webinars. You can see here a screenshot of some of those upcoming webinars. So you may find a variety of topics that are relevant to you, even though the webinar itself may not be law enforcement specific. And then also our next webinar will be in October, and that webinar will be covering the new beta release of Operations Dashboard. Operations Dashboard is the configurable app in the ArcGIS platform that supports building dynamic interactive dashboards to support either KPIs or real-time operational center needs, things of that nature. That app has gotten a complete refresh and will be a completely web-based application. It's really exciting, and if you're interested in dashboarding or you've used Ops Dashboard in the past, I really encourage you to come and join us for that webinar because our product team has made significant improvements to Operations Dashboard that I think have a lot of implications for law enforcement agencies. Just lastly, if you have any additional questions, as Stacy mentioned, or you're interested in learning more about the solution or any of the apps that I've shown today, or you have other questions related to ArcGIS and how our technology can support law enforcement, I encourage you to either give me an email. I'm at cdelaney@esri.com, or our global law enforcement manager, John Beck, at jbeck@esri.com. If you're interested in keeping up to speed on our technology, you can follow either John and I at cdelaney.gis or at @GISCop. And thanks for sticking around today. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we'll see you next time.